blizzard seals the city. The extreme cold descends. I stripped my enemy of all his assets, relying on my infinite space. I flew a helicopter to hoard supplies. When I opened my eyes, I had actually returned to the time before the apocalypse. Standing before me was that beast in human skin, Mao Bufan. In my past life, he hid his marriage, scammed all my savings, and forced me into a 200,000 debt. When the apocalypse arrived, I suffered endless humiliation and eventually became emergency food for his family. Enduring my body's weakness and terrible stomachache, my cold gaze was like a poison needle. My stare made his heart tremble, and a chill ran down his spine, but he quickly put on a mask of deep affection. You. Please don't be mad. I swear I'll listen to you from now on. I really have no feelings for that woman. It was all arranged by my family. Listening to his hypocritical voice, I was roaring wildly in my heart. But my body was as soft as mud. I didn't even have the strength to lift a finger. Are you sure you don't want an for drip? Emergency beds are extremely tight. If you're not getting treated, please leave. There are critical patients waiting. For drip. In my past life, I listened to Mao Bufan's lies. Didn't get the 4 and ended up with severe stomach disease. During the apocalypse, hiding in a freezing apartment. Even when I found food, I was often tortured to death by stomachaches. Doctor, I need the 4 drip. My voice was hoarse and dry, but carried unquestionable determination. Little Yue, doctors just like to make a fuss. When we get back, I'll boil some stomach-nourishing soup for you. It works way better than an 4. I'm just afraid the needle will hurt you. I took a deep breath, suppressing the surging nausea. Shut up. I'll pay for it myself. Now disappear from my sight immediately. Little Yue, I'm not being stingy about the money. I'm just, get out. I said coldly. Mao Bufan was startled by my outburst. A sinister look flashed across his face, which he quickly replaced with helplessness. Okay, don't get excited. I'll go buy you some porridge. Calm down. He turned and left. Finally, I was alone in the ward. I greedily breathed in the warm air. There was no bone-piercing apocalyptic cold, and no endless blizzards. In February 2065, global temperatures plummeted to -70 degrees. Blizzards buried cities. Social order collapsed. Countless people froze and starved to death. God actually gave me a second chance. I took a deep breath and rubbed the silver bracelet on my wrist. This was the only memento left by my mother. As a teardrop from my eye fell onto it, the antique silver bracelet suddenly became scorching hot, transforming into an almost invisible silver mark. The bracelet disappeared. A flash of white light crossed my mind, and I found myself in an endless space. Beside me stood an ancient well. I reached out to touch the water. A cooling sensation spread through my body, and all the pain miraculously dissipated. This is a spatial domain and a healing spring. I tried moving the water cup on the nightstand into the space with my mind, then taking it out. The process was completely seamless. My heart was pounding wildly. The biggest problem of hoarding supplies for the apocalypse was solved. Next was the issue of money. Thinking back to my past life, I kept transferring money to Mao Bufan again and again, only for that money to become his son's new toys and gifts to please his wife. Jiang Yue, you were such a gullible fool. In this life, I'm going to take back everything that's mine. I will absolutely not suffer the slightest injustice anymore. Just then, Mao Bufan walked in carrying a bag of cheap apples, wearing a fake smile. Little Yue, feeling any better? Have some fruit to recover. I looked at the luxury watch on his wrist, worth tens of thousands. Yet he pretended to be poor to avoid paying my medical bills. I sneered inwardly, but put on a resentful and sorrowful expression. Softening my voice, I said, Brother Bufan, I didn't want to pressure you. I just care about you too much. You've been ignoring me so much lately. I felt so awful that I took those pills. I knew him too well. This man's greatest weakness was his narcissism. Sure enough, his tense shoulders immediately relaxed. He said smugly, I knew my little Yue still had me in her heart. I've been busy with projects and neglected you. It's my fault. I know you're struggling too. Why don't you pay me back a part of it first? Even just 5 or 10,000. Just to put my mind at ease. Otherwise, I can't even eat properly. I clutched my stomach, frowning on cue. Mao Bufan frowned as well, wanting to make empty promises again. Little Yue, I can't even take out a single penny right now. Once the project payment arrives, I'll pay you back immediately. I'll treat you to a big meal and buy you clothes. Then, stay and keep me company tonight. My stomach is hurting, and I'm scared to be alone. I interrupted him, looking at him with teary eyes. Mao Bufan's eyes lit up, and he quickly agreed. Don't worry, I'll boil millet porridge for you and serve you well tonight. He was already calculating in his mind, looking at his hypocritical face. My eyes remained ice cold. Go handle the discharge procedures first. I just had my stomach pumped. I really have no energy to run around. A few thousand in medical bills was nothing to him, but it was enough to test his sincerity. Sure enough, Mao Bufan hesitated for a moment, but eventually gritted his teeth and went. After signing the discharge papers, I followed him into the Mercedes he bought on loan. I was calculating in my mind, hey Emv. From the hospital to the apartment, I had to squeeze a bit more out of him. At the supermarket, I pushed the shopping cart straight to the instant food section. The hunger from the last few months of my previous life flooded my memory like a tide. Everything on the shelves radiated a golden light in my eyes. Those were bargaining chips for survival. Boxes of instant noodles, sausages, canned luncheon meat, self-heating rice. I hoarded wildly like a starving wolf. The cart was piled up like a small mountain, weighing at least 400 to 500 pounds. Why are you buying so much? It'll spoil before we finish it. Mao Bufan looked pained by the cost. Weather is unpredictable. Stocking up gives me peace of mind. The doctor said my stomach is weak. I need to eat small, frequent meals. It's too much trouble to keep running outside. Thinking about his surprise for tonight, he could only grit his teeth and swipe his card. Back at the apartment, I made Mao Bufan carry all these things into the house himself. Going back and forth, he was completely exhausted. Once he finished, he tried to hug me. I stepped aside to avoid him, clutching my stomach. Moving all those things made my stomach act up again. I'm going to take a shower first. Looking at his eager eyes, I sneered inwardly. Entering the bathroom, I locked the door, turned on the faucet to cover any noise, and took out the sleeping pills I used to take. When I came out, Mao Bufan brought over some warm milk. Drink some milk. It soothes the stomach and helps you sleep. I took it, brought it close to my nose and sniffed, pretending to feel nauseous. It smells too rich, you drink it. Don't waste it. While speaking, I slipped the pill powder into the milk. Watching Mao Bufan fall into a deep slumber, I pulled out his phone, precisely filtering his contacts and chat history for his so-called bros and side chicks. Then, mimicking Mao Bufan's disgusting tone and phrasing, I sent out urgent bro-in-need messages in an instant. Bro, I urgently need 30,000 for cash flow. I'll pay you back 50,000 tomorrow. Do me a solid, I'll definitely reward you. Babe, I need some turnover for a business deal. Lend me 20,000 to cover it temporarily. Love you. I'll give you a big surprise later. In just a few dozen minutes. Notification sounds kept ringing continuously. Transfers ranging from thousands to tens of thousands. Like a steady stream, flowed right into Mao Bufan's account. Looking at the money arriving, I felt a slight sense of comfort. But looking at the silver lining in my account, I thought, this is still far from enough. You still owe me way too much. Next, I specifically targeted those shady loan websites that only require an ID. In our past life, this was exactly how he tricked me into downloading these online loan platforms, draining all my savings step by step, watching one approval after another pop up, and notifications of successful loan disbursements. A cruel smirk formed on the corner of my lips. This trick of catching wolves with empty hands, I learned from the scumbag in my previous life. Then, I transferred all the money to my own bank card. After finishing all this, I looked around the apartment. With a thought, I stored everything useful into my spatial domain. Finally, I rummaged through his wallet. Took his luxury watch and gold chain. Heh. All he ever did was use these to deceive young girls. Now, hand them all over to me. With another thought, I stripped him completely clean. Now he was stark naked, penniless, without a phone, not even a scrap of cloth to cover himself. When he wakes up, this miserable state of his will be enough to make him suffer. I chuckled coldly, glanced at the keys to Mao Bufan's house in my hand, turned around and went downstairs. I drove Mao Bufan's Mercedes, heading straight to his private residence, the place where I was tortured to death in my past life. I used the key to open the door and unceremoniously collected everything of value. My main target was the hidden compartment under the sofa. Sure enough, it was packed full of cash. This was all his illicitly obtained wealth. Even his wife didn't know about it. I had only discovered it by accident in my previous life. I took all 50 million in cash and moved it into my space. Finally, using Mao Bufan's phone, I sent a mass message to his contacts and social media. I am Mao Bufan. My investments have failed. I owe massive debts. And I am fleeing far away. My assets and debts have nothing to do with anyone else. Don't look for me. After posting, I turned off the phone. This ticking time bomb was enough to cause his social death. After dealing with the money, I pawned the Mercedes to an underground shop, getting 200,000 for it. With the money in hand, the next step was securing a shelter and hoarding supplies. At this point, there were only 3 days left before the apocalypse. I had to hurry up. Early the next morning, I rented a cargo truck. I shuttled back and forth between mega supermarkets, sweeping the shelves clean. Self-heating rice, canned food, snail rice noodles, instant foods, all kinds of snacks, dried vegetables, freeze-dried fruits, pickled vegetables and mustard tubers, instant soups and porridges, condiments and side dishes. I also grabbed various daily necessities, toiletries, clothing. I bought them all. "Miss, this truck really can't fit anymore." The manager wiped the sweat from his forehead. While staring at the pile of supplies, he clicked his tongue, looking utterly conflicted. "Look at all this. Why don't you call another truck? Or we can store a part of it for you. And you can come back for it tomorrow. Thank you for your hard work, everyone. This is just a little token of appreciation. Buy yourselves something to drink. Could you please help me push the rest of this to the empty spot in the deepest corner of the underground garage? The truck I called will be here any minute. We can just load it directly from there." Actually, I had planned this in advance. I had specially taken note of that spot. When I drove in earlier, it was a blind spot for the security cameras, rarely visited by anyone, making it perfectly convenient for my next move. Every time, relying on generous tips. And the lie that another truck is arriving soon. I managed to easily deceive them into pushing mountains of supplies into the camera blind spots. Then, taking advantage of having no one around, I silently absorbed everything into my spatial domain. Whatever I could buy, whatever could be used, whatever could be stored long-term. I swept it all up, stuffing my space to the brim. This was my only obsession. It was also my greatest source of confidence. In this unpredictable crisis, the most reliable thing I could hold on to. When the final batch of goods, a cart full of high-energy biscuits and vacuum-sealed beef cans, quickly vanished into my space, I suddenly realized that piecemeal shopping was too inefficient and too restricted. I needed to rent temporary warehouses as cover ASAP. Otherwise, hoarding supplies on such a massive scale was bound to draw unwanted attention. Therefore, I rented 4 warehouses in the suburbs east, south, west, and north as temporary supply drop points. Then, I headed to the massive wholesale agricultural markets. A ton each of chicken, duck, goose, mutton, and pork. A ton each of rice, flour, grains, and oil. Several tons of assorted seafood. Several tons of fruits and vegetables. A ton of various spices and seasonings. I demanded they be delivered to the warehouses in batches within 2 days. The boss was shocked, saying he didn't have that much in stock. I directly threw down a wad of cash. "Boss, this is just pocket change. Once everything is delivered, I'll give you another 200,000. The boss happily agreed and started mobilizing resources from neighboring cities to meet my demands. Next, I booked out to entire restaurants. Stir-fried, stewed, boiled, braised or roasted. Whatever they could cook in 2 days, I wanted it all. As for medicine and water, I didn't need them. I had an endless supply of healing spring water. The next priorities were tools and winter gear. In the afternoon, I bought warm clothing. Down jackets, thick cotton coats, heavy sweaters, winter suits, snow boots, insulated gloves, winter hats, scarves, thermal underwear, and 5,000 thick quilts, plus 1,000 sets of ski gear. I went to a hardware store and specifically stocked up on stun batons, tactical heavy-duty flashlights, large capacity batteries, windproof lighters, waterproof flintstones, and high-energy solid fuel blocks. My key purchase was 1,000 heating stoves. These are absolute hard currency for cooking and heating in the apocalypse. Finally, I procured 10 tons of firewood and a ton of coal. Then it was just waiting for these supplies to arrive at the warehouses. That night, I went to the restaurants to pick up the packaged cooked dishes of the day. In a secluded spot, I stored all this food into my space. Without even taking a break, I drove toward Lin County. It was about a 2-hour drive. That's where my safest shelter was located. Back in the apartment, Mao Bufan was slowly waking up. His gaze swept across the room. His muddled brain was jolted awake by the sight before him. The room was completely empty. There was nothing left except him, stark naked. Jiang Yue. Mao Bufan squeezed out the name through gritted teeth. Bichi. How dare you steal my car? How dare you take my things? Parting the dense vines and weeds. I stood at the entrance of the cave from my childhood memories. My nerves instantly tightened, and I subconsciously held my breath. Suddenly, the sound of a small dog whining came from nearby. A layer of cold sweat immediately broke out on my back, and I couldn't help but shudder. Gripping my stun baton, I carefully searched the area 3 times. I confirmed that around the cave entrance there were 0 traces of any large predators. There was only a wounded little wolf cub on the brink of death. It must have been abandoned. I let out a sigh of relief. I dripped some healing spring water onto it. And surely enough, its wounds healed completely. It seems it really works. I picked up the little wolf cub. I'll call you Grim. From now on, you'll accompany me. Then, we entered the cave. First, there was a narrow passageway half a meter wide, only allowing one person to pass sideways. It was perfect for blocking large monsters and intruders. As we went deeper, a massive rectangular silhouette suddenly entered my line of sight. That thing, compared to the rugged cave walls, seemed completely out of place. If my flashlight hadn't been so ridiculously bright, I wouldn't have noticed it even if I came here 100 times. This is a door. In a cave deep within an old forest. Why is there a man-made door? I was shocked but thrilled, my heart racing, my mind filled with questions. I played in this cave hundreds of times when I was a kid. I only remembered there was an underground river. I never noticed this thing before. Suppressing the excitement threatening to burst from my chest, I walked closer step by step, with a single thought. That heavy iron door instantly vanished without a trace into my space. Holding my flashlight, I walked inside step by step. When I clearly saw the scene inside, I gasped in shock. It was a whole new world inside. The ground was free of random rubble. Instead, it was completely dry, giving off a refreshing coolness. It was practically heaven. My heart instantly ignited with joy. This place. Isn't this God's way of preparing an apocalyptic survival shelter for me? No matter the blizzards outside, or the roaming monsters, inside this cave, I could live safely until the end of time. I shined the flashlight toward a corner, and my heart skipped another beat. Neatly stacked in the corner were several wooden crates. Faintly printed on them were the words military supplies. Scattered nearby were a few rifle bullets. These were clearly old relics from years ago. This was actually an authentic military bunker. To think this was once an official combat readiness base. It even had weapons. I was so excited I almost jumped up. Having both food and weapons in the apocalypse. That is the absolute pinnacle of survival. While I was picking up my apocalypse starter pack here, on the other side, Mao Bufan was on the verge of madness. He wrapped himself in a scrap of cloth he found somewhere, frantically borrowed a phone and called his bros. Bro Bufan, didn't you go bankrupt and run away? You must be joking, right? I went bankrupt? I ran away? Which son of a bichichi is talking nonsense? Mao Bufan's eyes were bloodshot with anger, roaring furiously into the phone. You posted it yourself on social media and sent mass texts. You even borrowed 20,000 from me. You promised to pay back 50,000. Don't try to deny it now. By the way, your wife is looking for you everywhere. She nearly blew up our phones. The words coming from the phone felt like a bucket of ice water, harshly poured over Mao Bufan's head. Only then did he realize that his phone had been taken by me. Those money borrowing messages, the post about fleeing town, it was all my doing. He ran home like a madman. As soon as he reached his building, he was blocked by several creditors demanding their money. He was cornered. He barely managed to break free and ran upstairs. The moment the door opened, a glass cup flew straight at his face. Mao Bufan, you finally decided to show up. Look at this. Look at this house. Everything is gone. Tell me. What the hell is going on? Mao Bufan stared at his house wiped cleaner than his own face, and then looked at the empty hidden compartment. His vision went black. He quickly grabbed onto the doorframe just to stay standing. He had held onto a shred of hope, thinking I only took some cash and drove away his car. He never imagined I would completely strip his house bare. Facing his wife's interrogation and the creditors banging on the door outside, he didn't dare say a single word about me. He could only grit his teeth and insist that his investments failed, and he had to sell his assets. After all, his money and those things weren't exactly obtained legally. His teeth ground together audibly, the hatred and fury in his heart almost burning a hole through him. Jiang Yue, I'll dig 3 feet into the ground to find you. Meanwhile, I was deeper inside the cave, successfully finding the flowing underground river. After feeding Grim some food, I immediately began setting up the place. First, I took out the furniture I had stored from Mao Bufan's and my rental apartment, pulling everything out and arranging them neatly. The next day, after returning to the city, considering the 4 warehouses were quite far apart, I simply rented a helicopter to shuttle me between the major warehouses. After several round trips, I finally stored all the supplies into my spatial domain. Finally, I made one last trip to the restaurants to collect the remaining packaged meals. Everything was ready. Then, I took Mao Bufan's phone out of my space and kept it beside me. I drove straight toward my secret base. Her phone's location finally appeared, and it's moving fast. This direction is the neighboring city. That's her. This bichichi scammed all my money. All your money was scammed by her too. Catch her, Mao Bufan, whose face was swollen like a pig, yelled to the creditors behind him. Subsequently, 4 or 5 cars hit the road together, speeding toward my location. By this time, the sky was already quietly darkening. The car moved slowly along the road, looking at the snow starting to fall. I knew the extreme cold was imminent. As I was approaching my destination, The roar of car engines came from behind. So they finally arrived. If you didn't come, I'd have let it go. But since you're here... Hey Mao Bufan's call came through right on time. Jiang Yue, bet you didn't expect this. There's a tracker on the phone. You can't escape. Listening to his clownish tone, I couldn't help but let out a mock laugh. Tracker? Did you really think I left that flaw by accident? I floored the gas pedal, and the car shot forward like an arrow, heading straight into the deep mountains. You really chased me all the way here. Want revenge? Then follow me. There are less than 12 hours left anyway. I want to see if you have the lives to make it back alive. The mountain road was rugged and hard to traverse. They could only tail me from far behind. Approaching the cave entrance, with a single thought, I stored the entire car into my space, turned around, and quickly ducked inside. By the time they arrived, panting and exhausted, I had already taken out the massive multi-ton boulders I had prepared in advance. With a loud crash, they tightly sealed the entire cave entrance. Outside the cave, Mao Bufan and his gang were dumbfounded. They furiously smashed and kicked the boulders, cursing loudly, but the rocks wouldn't budge an inch. Not even a scratch was left on them. Mao Bufan was so angry he was about to explode, screaming wildly. Jiang Yue, I don't believe you can stay in there forever. The day you come out, I'm going to kill you. Listening to his impotent roars from inside the cave, I found it both laughable and deeply satisfying. I couldn't even be bothered to respond to him. After running around for days, I was exhausted and starving. I just sat there and started eating a hot pot. The coal stove beside me burned bright red, keeping the temperature of the entire cave steadily at around 20 degrees Celsius. Grim was also becoming energetic. Outside, the howling winds began to pick up. The extreme cold of minus tens of degrees started spreading. Mao Bufan and his mob of creditors had completely frozen into solid ice sculptures. Each of them was still stuck in their ferocious poses of cursing and kicking. Amidst the blizzard, they became the most ridiculous ornaments in the deep mountains. While I, guarding a spatial domain overflowing with supplies, stayed in my warm and secure cave. All I needed to do was sit back peacefully and wait for this global extreme cold apocalypse to slowly come to an end.